Hello, everyone. Welcome today. I'm going to make this just really brief. I just want to thank everybody. Um, I'm I'm so happy that I live here in Colorado and work here, and all the great people that are willing to truly, include the whole community. And I know as emergency managers, that's the goal. And I told somebody else, I think emergency management gets that more than any branch of government. So I appreciate you all, and I appreciate all the CILs that are here, everybody that's giving up their day. I know we all have really busy schedules, so thank you. The big purpose of this is just, a lot of this for me originally was to connect Centers for Independent Living with planners throughout the state. Just knowing, the first thing to know about CILs is we're disability led. So the majority of our staff, admin, everything actually have disabilities. And I think that is so much important. We're not an organization run by individuals that don't have disabilities for disabilities. So I think we're all in the right place and a two-way street. I hope today that we get, information that we can share and how we can work together through the future both ways. There are some things that CILs are limited, and I know there's some things that planners, have limit and may not know. So the two-way street, being able to share information, I think is such a great thing. And with that, I am going to turn. Well, first of all, I got to also thank Sadie and Tim and Carly. They didn't have to do this either. And it's again so awesome to be part of a community that is really working to meet the needs of individuals with disabilities. So thank you. And I will turn it over to you, Sadie, and your team.
Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. I'm Sadie Martinez. I'm the Access and Functional Needs Program Supervisor for the state of Colorado. For those of you who may not know me, my team is Carly Sipes. She is our whole community inclusion planning coordinator, and then Tim Mann, who is our whole community inclusion planning specialist. They both serve in different specialized roles, but we're not going to go into roles today except for what we're going to be playing. And so if everybody who is in here, if you have not put in parentheses what role you're going to be playing, for instance, my name has Sadie Martinez. I am playing in parentheses facilitator. All right. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to open up rooms when we go in, and when we go in to do the rooms, we are going to, you might need to go and join the room you would like to go into. What we want you to do is be solution focused on here. If we hear ourselves going, well, there's the problem. We have a policy in the way of it. Let's document that as, can we look at that policy when we go back from here to be able to find a way to maybe work it where it can be waived during a disaster, not tied to any laws, but tied to your rules that and policies that are in your organization to help us with that solution with that. Let's think what else. The exercise guidelines, we want you guys to be open. There's no fault environment, so there's no blame in here. We are just trying to learn from each other and find solutions in here. This we want to respond to the scenario using insights learned from one another, as well as your current plans and capabilities. So being honest on what you can do and what you can't do. A lot of our rural community emergency managers aren't able to provide evacuation resources. So just being upfront and honest, we'll be able to keep working to find solutions, because there may be other partners that have that solution. This exercise is an opportunity to discuss possible options and solutions. It's problem solving. Problem solving should be the focus in this exercise. Apply the scenario based on unique challenges and resources that may exist in your community. Each of you, regardless if you're a person with lived experience, an organization, or agency, you have a role to play in your community before, during, and after disasters. And we want everybody to be able to speak up to be able to help that. So using the raised hand, because that's going to be helpful, especially when we're having ASL interpreters, to be able to have people not talking over each other. Using the chat function will also be important, especially we're in a virtual environment. And so please utilize those. Facilitators, please recognize some of the hand raising and trying to go through seeing if anybody's not speaking up a lot, to ask them to maybe put in the chat or speak up. We want everybody's voice to be heard, or everybody's experience to be placed into the scenario. There will be artificial information in the scenario. We are targeting the information tied to the objective, and there may be incorrect or exaggerated language. So be graceful with that. Our exercise agenda, we're going to go into module 1, which is 2 months after the, I'm sorry, in this one, it is during the event. Carly, I think there might be mess ups on there. The evacuation scenario, I believe, is during the event. So there may be some of that glitchy in here. I'm going to read the objectives, and then we'll be able to keep moving this along. We want to identify the transportation and evacuation resources needed by all members of the community during preparedness, response, recovery, and include resources needed resulting from the evacuation and transportation disruptions. So you may be looking at some of the maintaining health and independence, support services, and safety resources that may also be disrupted in here. We want to identify transportation and evacuation resource solutions, strategies, and partners to support all members of the community during preparedness, response, and recovery. And then we want to effectively communicate evacuation and transportation information to all members of the community. So evaluators, that's what you're evaluating when you are looking at these objectives. Players, that's what you're going to be playing in. The first thing we're going to do now is we're going to go into your rooms, and we're going to do a 20-minute who's who and what do you do. And then I'm going to pull you back from your rooms, and then I'll go over the scenario with you, and then I'll give the rest of the exercise instructions in that 2 minutes before we go into start scenario 1. So with that, I'm going to open up all rooms. Please join the rooms you would like to participate in. Again, I may move some of you, so I'm going to be watching that before I join my rooms. Please join those rooms now. I pulled us back a few minutes early. That's why the timer still has 3 minutes there, and that's good. I'd rather us be ahead of schedule, but the biggest room was done with their who's who and what do you do introductions. And so we pulled you back over here. And now what we're going to do is I'm actually going to have Carly to follow along. If you have the exercise manual open, we are going on to, we're going to be on page 4 first, and then Carly's going to go and introduce us to the scenario on page 5. But I just wanted to finish. When we go into those rooms right now together, we're going to review the scenario as a big group. When you go back into your rooms, as your groups go in there, we want you to identify key issues, decisions, and actions for each of you as in your role. And then also, we want you to participate in the group discussion using any of the questions that we have that are going to be part of the scenario. And then you're going to, the scribe and the reporter, after that, we're going to pull you back into this main room, and then we're going to ask a few of the rooms to do report out. And then after the exercise, when we're going to give feedback, we want you all to be able to at least either in the chat or as we walk away, talk about things that went well. One thing to take away, what didn't go well, also what relationships were formed or need to be formed, and what did not get enough attention. So just to give you, as we move forward. Now, we're going to be working on module 1, which is 2 months before the event. Module 2 is going to be 3 days before the event. What we want you to do when you walk away from this exercise is we want you to take back to your community and work with your programs and emergency management on module 3 and 4. That'll keep this discussion going and keep you rolling in the work that you're doing with your partners in emergency management. And so it'll also have help emergency management look at who needs to be integrated in the plan, or have memorandums of agreements or contracts or memorandums of understanding in there. The Centers for Independent Living will be able to better identify how your goals. I remember when I was at the Center for Independent Living, we used to have our big goals for each of our different service areas in there to be able to work together in that. And so I just wanted to get level set on what we'll be doing with that. And so what questions do you have before I have Carly start reading out the scenario on page 5? All right, facilitators, are you feeling strong in your rooms? I did delete Frontier. Nobody went into Frontier, so I moved the evaluator and the facilitator into group 2. So Frontier is no longer represented in this exercise. All righty, Carly?
Awesome. Okay. As Sadie said, I am on page 5 of the tabletop manual, and the first module is planning. So the scenario is 2 months before the event, and it reads, Emergency Management and CILs, Centers for Independent Living, are meeting to improve integration of access and functional needs in disasters for transportation and evacuation planning. There are 3 discussion questions as part of this module. The first one is, what are the critical transportation and evacuation resources needed in your community, and how do you plan to address them? And we would like you to address the CIL role, the Center for Independent Living role, and identify what the CILs can and cannot do or support currently. And B, identify emergency management's role. Identify how emergency management is currently capturing community resource needs and coordinating. Question 2 is, what tools or processes are you using to identify critical transportation resource needs across your areas served? A, the CILs will identify how they capture transportation needs of consumers in INR meetings and goal settings. And B, emergency management, what are tools and processes that you are using to identify community critical transportation resource needs? Question 3 is, who needs to be involved in critical transportation and emergency evacuation planning in order to meet the needs of the whole community? A, the CILs will address how they are currently supporting their local service areas, emergency management. And if they're not currently supporting, identify at least one way that you can support. And then emergency management will identify who is currently involved in evacuation planning. So that is our first scenario, and we will shortly join those breakout rooms again to discuss.
Yep, and INR means information and referral. Opening up all rooms, please join the room you were in. Welcome back, everyone. I know you probably didn't finish your conversations, and we understand that. It does help us go back and be able to keep going through that solution in there. We only were able to get through one question. I'm sure the majority of you may have been doing the same thing there. There's just not enough time, but really what we're demonstrating here is how to use this tool and how to keep it moving when you go back and work with your Centers for Independent Living and Emergency Management and your public health, human services, support service partners. With that, I'm going to give anybody the option, whatever the reporter out for room 7, 6, or 5. Whoever raises their hand first, we're going to have you report first. All right, Monica?
I'll go first to get it over with because the nerves of like, am I gonna hit everything that the group mentioned? So group, I will do my best. But in group 7, we talked about the first thing that kind of came up was that relationship connection piece, and being able to fill that gap here. So whether that's with transportation partners, CILs, emergency management, public health, being able to kind of fix that with this group here, but the importance of those connections with resources. We also talked about resources in the sense of both equipment resources, so things like buses to actually be able to transport people, but then also things like law enforcement, fire to protect egress routes, and planning that's kind of needed ahead of time for that, as well as this being a resource, but like public education or campaigns around that. Our group talked quite a bit about the need to really help empower folks to evaluate where you're living, support system, access to those resources, knowing that resources can get really tapped, especially in a widespread disaster. So the most that we can empower folks to have some sort of plan to whatever your ability is really important, and making sure that those resources or education options are not just web-based, because that creates barriers for folks, but being able to get in front of people, meet them where they're at, in relation to that. We also talked about RTD not being able to go into active evacuation zones. And so that being an important thing for folks to know that there's like pickup sites that are needed outside of that if RTD is the resource that you're going to use. And then just getting resources in folks' hands, and help them with the personal preparedness side. So someone in our group mentioned a Be Ready app, and there's classes that they pair with that so that folks that use the app then have this ongoing education. So the last two pieces that I have, because I'm trying to talk slowly, knowing interpretation is not easy if I try to blow through this. But with the second question, we talked about task forces that Douglas counties got put together to help folks kind of go in and get people that might not be more largely connected to like a CIL or assisted living or somewhere where there's mass evacuation going on. So that's a really neat process they have. And then a gap that we identified in that question too is also just not having a good way to necessarily collect kind of who needs that support when it's individuals in our community, when it's somewhere that's congregate housing or somewhere that we've got like a group of folks, that becomes something that's known to our public health partners, our mass care partners. But when it's individuals, just having that gap in how we better get information and support our community as a whole.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yay. All right. We are going to pull, I'm going to pull up the reporter outer for group number 4 for rural, and see if there's anything different or wobbly that you would report out.
That first report was awesome, and we had a great mix of different ESFs in our group. So we had a pretty comprehensive discussion about how we address transportation communication needs. One of the things that we discussed is the restriction of not being able to have a registry for people who may need additional assistance, and how we work around that while still respecting everybody's HIPAA rights. We spoke about the use of community alerts and call centers, the value of running scenarios regularly, and making sure that you're either including the community partners in those the practice tabletops, or touching base with them so that they are aware of any changes or lessons learned during those practice sessions, and making sure that we are highlighting, each resident's personal responsibility as much as possible so that each individual can be prepared and hopefully reduce the load for the emergency responders who are trying to help in an evacuation. But sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Nope, you keep going.
But we touched on other things like the resources that are available and the other things that were discussed in the first report out. But those were just some of the main things I wanted to highlight.
Thank you, Lacey. I'm going to call out group 3 and 2. Would you add anything more as for the rural experience? So the reporter for group 3, is there anything else you would add? And then we'll go into my group, which is Ty, who is group 2. 3, do you have anything different first before I go to group 2?
Yeah, Sadie, this is Sarah. Coming from the rule group perspective, I loved how like local and specific a lot of the stuff that we talked about was to the areas that the folks in our room represent. So from the CIL side, just kind of talking with people about alerting, evacuation plans, transportation for wheelchair users. On the public health EM side, just kind of connecting folks with local resources, touched on how first responders, whether that's ambulance or volunteer firefighters, are likely to know the community and who might have additional needs. Doing outreach with HOAs, ambulance authorities, kind of like shifting mindsets to keeping an eye out for your neighbors. We also talked through some resource connections that I think some of the other groups have touched on. And then we just talked about kind of connection with transportation resources, so reaching out to like school districts, casinos, um, and just kind of have an idea of what resources might be available in your area.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, group 2. Ty, would you add anything different than what's been identified from the rules perspective?
I think a lot of it was there. We heavily went into planning. The only thing, I think towards the end of the time we were talking about maybe like a universal or shared language when it comes to plans. That way it can work across system, across counties, across CILs, just have something that's kind of together. But having something that identifies, particularly for rural, having, you know, what is, what are your supports within time frames? How can someone get to you within 5 minutes? Can someone get to you within a half an hour? Can someone get to you within an hour? And know that those might have different responses, and how you would plan and prepare to go. Um, and then the other thing that came up was maybe looking at extending the Good Samaritan laws for like CPR to for emergencies to maybe remove some of the liability for issues. And I'm the one that suggested that, but I think that would help like with people who are getting HCBS services might be able to get support from the people coming in. So it would open up the amount of support as well as like maybe the Centers for Independent Living who can't provide transportation. And then it was suggested maybe a liability waiver. So thank you for the HCBS's home and community-based services. I'll try and do better. But a lot of what we were talking about is making sure that plans exist, plans are in place, people know about the plans. So that's what we mostly talked about.
Thank you, Ty. All right, now I'm going to go into groups 6 and 5. Do you have anything different? We'll go to 6 first, then the other big city or urban resources, or even the ones that have come up with rural. Who's our reporter for group 6? Is that Anisha?
Yes, the 6th is Denver one. Sorry, I don't even remember our number, but I do have notes. So we had Atlantis in our group. So we had Kurt talking about the catchment area for like 7 counties. One of the gaps that they identified was haven't really how to figure out how to send out county specific alerts. They can only really send to like the larger area, but they do have a weekly newsletter that they use to spread the word about preparedness items, things like that. And they host these monthly virtual and in-person preparedness workshops. And on the other side of things, for the government side of things, Denver OEM, we've been hosting a different bunch of tabletop exercises and attending different ones, just like this one. We've had one on public safety power shutoffs, and we're doing an internal city leadership tabletop on evacuation as well through our mass evacuation planning efforts, which is alongside DDPHE and Denver Human Services as well. Broomfield, they have also been working on some evacuation planning. They work very closely with their VOADs a lot, and that has been a really big help there. And public health has a strong senior services program that they also utilize for like transportation resources too. So they want to kind of use that moving forward. And then what else do we have here? Atlantis is also a great resource for providing referral to transportation companies and holding that list of resources, as well as being able to kind of reach out to individuals on the personal preparedness level. And then, like I said, Broomfield has a really solid resource list of transportations because they own all of their transportation resources, and these resources are very well known around their community. So it's a good fallback for them. DDPHE, Denver Department of Public Health and Environment, is building out a phone book of community partners that they can reach out to in response to an emergency. And then what do we got? Non-traditional partners. Sorry, have we moved on to number 3?
Don't go for it. Yep.
Okay.
We didn't get to number 3 yet. So go
Well,
for
then
it.
we can start off with number 3. Pikes Peak is a solid list of people that and resources they've been tapping. The SECO maps that we kind of learned about during the AFN conference. It's a map resource given by the state for demographics. Thank you, Sadie. Their VOED partners, both Pikes Peak and Broomfield, talked highly of their faith-based partners as well, and how that Pikes Peak has actually tapped into an MOU that a faith-based organization has with the charter company. And Pikes Peak can actually use that MOU as well, which is I thought was really cool. And then one of the kind of gaps that Broomfield identified was since they're kind of caught between two larger jurisdictions, it's hard sometimes whenever those resources are pulled to those larger jurisdictions, and they've learned how to be pretty self-sufficient in that way. And Atlantis talked about how people should be able to tap into maybe their parks and rec departments. Some of them have mini buses for transportation. Youth organizations also would be a good resource, or just an identifier for planning purposes, as well as medical needs vans, and Denver Human Services identified Via Mobility, which seems to have a pretty far reach around the Front Range. So that was a specific company that was named in our room.
Awesome. Thank you, Anisha. All right. How about Ross, in your group, group 5? Anything different or anything more you want to add?
Yeah, let me take a look here. We've covered a lot. We talked a lot about trust and how the language we use or the way that we communicate either builds trust with individuals or potentially doesn't. And that one of the things we can be doing now to prepare is to be building those trusting relationships. And CILs, Centers for Independent Living, can play a big role in that. One of the gaps we identified is that RTD can't send its vehicles into emergency declared evacuation zones. And so there needs to be some kind of a method for getting wheelchair accessible vehicles into those areas when they're needed. And so that's a gap that we identified. The other thing we talked about that hasn't come up as much in the other report outs is what can we learn from our partners in other states that have experienced big fires? I was in Portland, Oregon when we had an urban fire. Our colleagues in Colorado or in California have always obviously experienced a lot of these issues. And so we identified a few resources, including a conference, Access and Functional Needs Conference, that we could learn from the experiences of other states.
Sadie, thank you. All right. Well, I hope we all were. I love how we all reported out because there was some similarities, but many different ideas also that could help us in each of our other groups. Any other comments? Or anybody want to add anything else? Go for it, Craig.
Thanks, Sadie. This is Craig with CPWD. Just wanted to add a few more things to Ross's great notes. Is something that the CILs in our group talked about was the importance of producing outreach materials in multiple formats. So especially written and visual versions of it, especially videos that have the content in American Sign Language, being super important to make sure that everyone's getting information in a way that works for them. And then also the importance of plain language and simplified text. We had a real life example where even in our group, we had people using a lot of acronyms and industry-specific terminology that we had to end up defining just for conversation within our group. And that's really true for all the outreach that we do, making sure that we're defining acronyms, not using industry-specific terminology that may not be universally understood, and the importance of using plain language and simplified text with all of the outreach materials.
This is Sadie. Thank you. Yes, that was it sounds like that was in each of the groups. We all have our own language we use, and we need to be able to understand it in plain language. And so a lot of what our program does is making it universally designed, such as even some of the services that are provided that CILs use on a regular basis needs to be able to be said in plain language so emergency managers understand it and vice versa. So thank you. Thank you for sharing those. All right. Well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and have Carly, wait, I'll do one more call out. We have about 2 minutes if anybody else wants to add anything. All righty, we're going to go ahead and go on a 15-minute break. It might be 16 or 17 minutes, but we're going to come back at 10:45. We're going to keep it on the screen so that you guys know that you'll know about how much more time it is. Go ahead at the bottom over your reaction. You could put the "Be right back" button, but when you come back, if you'll put that down so I have a gauge on how many people are back when you get back. If you're not able to do that, then that's okay, but this will just help us know where we're at when we get back. So we'll see you all back at 10:45. All right, 30-second warning, everyone. Please put your "I'm back" down when you come back. I need to make sure my primary roles are back, such as facilitators. And Carly has 2 minutes. All right, Carly, if you'll go into preparedness and the next scenario.
Thank you, Sadie. This is Carly. The module 2 is regarding preparedness, and the scenario is 3 days before the event. So temperatures have been soaring over the past week, as well as a rise in winds and a significant drop in humidity levels. Weather conditions have drastically increased the risk of extreme fire danger. The National Weather Service issues a fire weather watch for your area and surrounding areas. The National Weather Service has also advised that there is a potential for an extended red flag warning for your jurisdiction in 3 days' time. Due to an upcoming weather event, there's a threat of wildfire public safety power shutoffs. This threat of wildfire has been extended to include more populated areas in your community. The discussion questions, and there are 3 for Module 2. Number 1 is, what actions is your agency responsible for taking to prepare for possible emergency evacuations throughout the community? And again, we're asking CILs to identify their role and answer the above, or if they're currently not doing anything, identify what you can do to help people prepare or help prepare the people you serve. And then emergency management, identify your process as well for question number 1. Question number 2 is, what transportation partners should be notified and activated for potential evacuation support? For the CILs, same thing, answer the above question. And if you're not currently doing anything, identify what you can do. And emergency management, also answer question number 2. And number 3 is, how are you currently communicating with the community about potential evacuations? And the same apply for CILs or community members. Identify what you're doing or what you can do, and emergency management, share what the emergency management perspective is for question number 3.
All right, this is Sadie, opening rooms. Go back into your rooms. Looks like Ross, his room. Craig, can we count on you to take some notes until Ross returns, please? All right, opening him up. All right, well, welcome back, everyone. Thank you all for participating. This is really I love the conversations that are happening and solutions that are happening. This round, we're going to start with our rural room. So room number 4, 3, and 2. And whoever raises their hand first, let's go ahead and start with that room on our reporter outer. All right. Let's start with Sarah, then we'll go to, we'll see if Ty or Lacey have any more to add. So Sarah, if you'll start.
Yeah, we kind of kicked off the discussion by talking about, from the SIL perspective, getting information out to folks on social media, but also kind of being mindful that everybody might not be on social media, so ways to leverage, text, calls, emails. From the public health and emergency management side, we talked about alerting, reaching out to NGOs to kind of coordinate resources for transportation and sheltering. For local governments, kind of reaching out ahead to finance or emergency managers for any expenses that might come from a potential response. For transportation partners, we talked about coordination through ESF1, just reaching out to folks like via RTD, just to see who would be available if something were to happen. And then more under communication, from the SIL side, we talked about like reaching out to nonprofits, transportation resources, helping people connect with or know how to access those resources, such as resource lists. And then on the public health EM side, we just talked some more about National Weather Service and EM getting posts out about the fire weather, working with like property owners and how to get that information on to folks that might be in rentals or short-term rentals. And then we spent some time talking about some ways to get folks signed up for alerts. So maybe like when new clients show up for any kind of resource organization, just having a method to make sure that they know what alerting is out there and how to sign up and get involved with that.
Thank you, Sarah. Ty, would you add anything else?
We mostly focused on the first or on the who to activate. A lot of internal processes, but a big thing that we were talking about was maybe starting up conversations of who the supports are. Reaching out to the community using recreational vehicles and organizations that might have large shuttle vans or ATVs or things like that. I thought it was really cool that, maybe tapping into communities to see if your neighbor who has a livestock vehicle might be able to help you. And making sure that we can help with the ask. The only thing that I think we're running into or would like more information on is like the liability issues. We also were trying to talk about utilizing some apps like My Colorado and emergency alert systems.
Thank you, Ty. All right. Lacey, would you add anything else?
Yeah, so one of the things that we were discussing is making sure that we have backup local resources, assuming that organizations like the Red Cross would not be able to, well, may not be able to assist immediately, being in a rural or, out of the way area, especially with limited entry and exit routes during an evacuation. Making sure that we are tapping our faith-based community and other VOADs, and also, especially with larger counties, that we are being conscious of an emergency being in part of the county doesn't mean that the entire county needs to be activated, so that we are selecting the right emergency managers to manage the right kind of incidents. And also not to oversaturate our residents with emergency alerts using that system very sparingly, so that if an alert comes through, whether it is through Nixle or other alert systems, I just nixles because that's what we use in Archuleta County, that they're not getting updates on things like controlled burns through that system, so that if an alert comes through, that they know that it's serious and they need to pay attention.
This is Sadie. Thank you. Awesome. All right, we're going to go to group 5, then 7, then 6. So we're going to go to group 5, which is Ross is the reporter, and then Monica, and then I think, wait, let's make sure. And then Anisha. Yep.
Yeah. So to summarize, we talked a lot about the standard process around a public safety power shutdown and what that looks like and how it's improved recently. We talked about the importance of timely and also constant communication. People are distracted during an evacuation or an emergency. And so even if the information isn't changing, just having a regular cadence, a drip feed of information is helpful for people to stay up to date. And then last, specific to transportation, we dug in a little bit into the question around a registration or identifying folks that need rides and the potential problems that could create, maybe a false sense of security. Just because so many emergencies are different, you can't guarantee that somebody's going to have a ride. And so an alternative to a registry was the idea of, building more resilient local networks. We didn't get a lot of time to talk about what that means, and I think it'd be interesting to explore that in a little bit more detail. I would also invite anybody from Group 5 to add. I did miss the first 2 minutes of the conversation due to a phone call that I couldn't get off of.
Thank you, Ross. It doesn't look like anybody's speaking up, so you must have done good. All right, or it was already captured in the other report out. So, all right, let's go to group 7. Monica, would you add anything different?
Yeah, a couple things we talked about are folks from Greeley that work with the CIL there talked about communications with their provider or their consumers rather, and having specialists that reach out to those consumers afterward just to be able to identify next steps to make sure individuals have a good plan in place since we're a couple days out from anything occurring at this point in the scenario. We also talked about on the emergency management side, some of our folks would be looking at identifying shelter locations and putting staff on standby, knowing that the conditions that we're in are a bit severe. And then at this point, since nothing is actively occurring, we'd be just kind of doing that coordination call element. And our group also talked about just the importance of the discussion ahead of time for the transit partners and really having those relationships well ahead of a time so we're not scrambling in the moment when we're coming up just days out from this. But other than that, everything has been hit.
Awesome. All right, group 6, Anisha.
Yeah, so we kind of opened up question 1. Broomfield talked about that early communication, connecting with first responding agencies, identifying what risks might be going on depending on, with the public safety power shutoff and whatnot. And then having that early communication with the community as well, putting out social media, going into their opt-in notification system. And Denver right now, we're working on with the region kind of standardizing evacuation language across the region, and then a communication education plan for that language. And it looks like Pikes Peak is also working on their own standardized language as well. So that seems to be kind of the flavor of the month right now. Atlantis had identified the CU Denver Center for Innovation Design and Engineering, the SEED or whatever, with Julia Beam has like a lot of great information on like the plain language and picturing different methods of communication and stuff. So that was a really good plug there. Kind of moving on, we'd kind of talked about, who had participated and what types of exercises, especially regarding to evacuation. I want to also second the alert fatigue that was brought up by Broomfield as well, especially around like the Front Age area. We've had a lot of fire weather watches already in 2026. So we're trying to be careful about how much we push our partners every single time that there's a fire weather day. And also kind of noted that with the public safety power shut off, you kind of want to look at how that might hamper regular transportation services because some of those services might have to go offline, and those can't be really be used in an emergency if even their routine work is hindered. And then we also talked about especially for municipalities, we talk about FEMA is really big on like, oh, just create an MOU. However, Denver did note that anything regarding money makes it a contract, so that creates a whole bunch of different legal hoops that we have to go through as a city if we have any sort of money tied to an MOU. So it doesn't really work, especially because emergency funding is a huge challenge in and of itself and might not necessarily even exist. So we kind of, he referred to it as like a non-binding spirit of cooperation agreement with partners, and Broomfield had called it master service on-call agreements with $0 amounts. They hadn't done it with transportation yet, but it has worked for with other services. So that was kind of a little tip for other municipalities to kind of get around some of that legalese stuff. But that was the summary of what we discussed.
Thank you. All right, opening it up to the group. Any other things that we may have missed that made you have an aha moment that you could speak up now? Go ahead, Ty.
I guess I did kind of forget to cover this. We were talking about like accessibility, of how to communicate and how to spread that around and making sure that there are ways for people to be heard even if they don't like use social media. But we also wanted to include, or at least partially wanted to include in the accessibility, in the preparation and leaving, that not everyone may not have the financial sort of accessibility to, you know, move or coordinate in an evacuation or an emergency, particularly if they're on a fixed income. So there is just maybe a few other things to, highlight in there, making sure that everyone has what they need, um, in both being told, but also, making sure that if they need to leave that and they have an emotional support animal, that they may have a carrier for that animal if they need to evacuate in another person's vehicle or something like that.
Thank you. Any others? All right. Yay. All right. I'm gonna now get our evaluators prompted. We're a little ahead of schedule, but that's good also. With that, on the evaluators, what I would like for you to do is get ready to do a report out. Carly, if you'll put in the 5 areas that they could report out on. You guys are going to start the report outs and then others could add in there. All of our evaluators, we would like you to start the conversation on the engagement summary. The reason why we do engagement summaries versus an after action report is because this is too big of a group to keep working through that after action report. And a lot of times there's a lot of work that goes into that. We wanted you to join us today to be able to see how to do this, take it back to your communities and work through this in your community. So it is very community focused and planned with. And so that's the reason why we're not able to get to module 3 and 4. You could actually take this back and do module 3 and 4 as your tabletop as you're working with your community in either the meetings that you're already having, such as your multi-agency coordination groups, maybe your healthcare coalition groups, your community emergency response team groups, maybe even your centers for independent living groups that you're doing, maybe even serving in your outreach or your trainings that you all provide in your centers for independent living. It just helps us to better keep understanding what we don't know because we don't know, and understanding specifically what we are asking you to do when we work together both ways. And so that's why I wanted to start out with our evaluators to come back and be able to come in and give us the feedback. So we're actually going to go in order, but of course we didn't start with 1 because we eliminated that group. We're going to start with group 2, and then we'll go to 3, 4, and 5. And so can we have Sherry come off and give you, and you don't have to go through all 5 of those 4 of those areas. You could go into one or one of those areas and let somebody else do another one. It's up to you. So at least choose one of those and let's go from there.
Okay, thank you, Sadie. This is
You're welcome.
Sherry. So I think one thing that went well in room 2 was a really active and meaningful conversation. Also, one thing to take away, I heard a lot of talk about establishing common language between CILs and public health and EM, and I think that's a big one. That the better we all understand what we all do, and share that language, develop that language is really important. I haven't really identified anything that didn't go well. I'm gonna, with what relationships were formed or need to be formed, I'm gonna leave that to the people who've reported out and on what happened, in our group. Thank you, Ty, for being our scribe and reporter.
Thank you. All right, let's go to group 3.
Howdy, everybody. So the kind of like 4 main points that I impacted my group and for the main report outs were you all have a really good, realistic, and raw understanding of the resources in your jurisdictions and what limitations they have. That is great. We know who we can call on, we know who we can't call on, we know who we can only call on in certain situations, and we know what resources are going to actually be available and what is probably not going to be available in an incident. And that is great to know. And we have included that in our planning. I would like to back up that when you are including that in your planning, make sure to always remember the cost considerations as well, since we are dealing with some private sector partners and NGOs that might not just fall to the normal government budget interagency cost share agreement in an EOC. There might need to be a more better understanding of any specific legal or financial implications as part of mobilizing those resources. I would also recommend a better understanding on your center of independent living. Know who serves you and know who they serve, because the county next to you might not get served by the same CIL. And that might lead to issues on, well, not issues, but different considerations on what resources might be made more available for you compared to your neighboring jurisdiction. And then also, since each CIL, while they are collaborative, have sometimes different services, know what services, again, your CIL has, because if you hear, hey, my CIL has X, Y, and Z, yours might not, or might not be to that point. For example, my CIL, I have Kurt, who is dedicated for emergency planning and response, and I know many, if not all other CILs don't really have that or aren't getting to that point yet. And that is a major difference that I have with some of the other counties around me. And then I do want to highlight the importance of establishing MOUs in emergency management. We are great at building relationships, and the relationships that I saw you guys come forward with, many of them were handshake agreements or just general understandings that, hey, we're going to help each other, which is amazing. And I know, as Anisha brought up, there can be definitely some procurement and contracting issues, but if you have the ability to formalize something through an MOU, doesn't have to be a contract, it can be a non-binding best practice agreement on the lowest level. Having something written out and tacked on to that plan or procedure that you have with them, just so when push comes to shove, we are on each other's same page. And then I just want to highlight again, communication fatigue. it's not just alert and warning fatigue. We all know we can scroll through social media or email and only really 1% of things catches our eye, and we need to be in that 1%. So it's not just alerting fatigue, it's overall communication fatigue, and how do we tailor our collaborations and end products to be in that 1% that catches people's eye. And then finally, don't really have a solution for this, but I just noticed we're always having this discussion and kind of not really a debate, but do we want to have that pre-identified list of individuals with access to functional needs in our communities? We know, especially on the first responder end, it has helped greatly with first responders getting to where they need to go and knowing who in their community is at risk. It might need extra assistance, but I know many of the people in my group and many of you brought up there are HIPAA concerns, there are legal concerns, there are privacy concerns, and I feel like this is just going to always be a never-ending debate of, what's good, what's bad, how do we do this, if it's realistic or not. So I'd like to hear a little bit more discussion on that if anyone would like to put out. And overall, group 3 was amazing, and that's it for Connor.
Okay. Thank you, Connor. All right, group 4.
Connor covered a lot of stuff, so thank you, Connor. I would say one of the key takeaways is definitely knowing your community partners and maintaining those relationships. And also something that we didn't really touch on, but I think is worth mentioning is utilizing your 211 resources, whether you are in a active incident or in recovery. I know we didn't get to recovery today, but they have a lot of resources available for the communities that can also, help share the burden on the emergency responders and all of our ESF partners.
Thank you, Lacey. All right. Group 5.
I thought that group 5 did amazing as well. Something I heard consistently throughout the discussion was how important it is to build those relationships and set expectations beforehand. They really emphasize the need for planning and building those partnerships beforehand and training their folks. And they also had a strong focus on that neighborhood preparedness and community support network, really recognizing those neighbors, those local organizations, and those trusted community members as well. I think that I can't speak for the group, but I think that one thing that could be an area of improvement was the need just for more planning around transportation assistance and evacuation support for individuals with access to functional needs. They talked about needing clearer processes and communication around what transportation support is available and what evacuation routes are available as well.
Thank you. All right, let's go to group 6.
So there were a lot of things that I thought went really well. I thought the sort of proactive gap identification was really good, and also asset versus need, really establishing like what your needs were well ahead of time, especially in the first scenario, and that idea of asset mapping, and building out those databases of partners and organizations. I think specifically looking at the first scenario, I was kind of waiting to hear. I think what one takeaway was I was really waiting to hear more about like what was your sort of setting up your incident command system, what was your IAP, and what was that emergency operations structure, and then were you integrating your CIL into that, and something that we kind of put as an opportunity was getting them ICS, someone from CIL staff certified in basic ICS, so that you can integrate them into as a liaison into that EOC. Combined messaging, I thought was also a really interesting idea that a few people threw out. In the second scenario, really talking about how the alert system, but making it accessible, as accessible as possible. Something that we didn't really talk about was maybe using sort of door-to-door communication, on-the-ground communication, if those systems go down. And I thought that was something that might be you might want to have a conversation about. But also, as we looked at the second scenario, again, I kept just really honing in on where is the integration between emergency management and folks who are, from CIL, and embedding them in there because they can give you, you can overlay your GIS heat maps of high risk areas with data that they can provide of who might be in those areas. What's that sort of last mile assistance for first responders so they can help get people out and get them to the transportation needed to get them out of those high risk areas. Pre-staging your assets based on that density data, I think would also be really beneficial. So, but overall, I thought it went really well. There were a lot of things that you guys were talking about that I just being on the sort of on the ground side in a fire truck didn't even think about. And it was really fascinating for me, at least, to be part of this. So I appreciate it. And thank you.
Thank you. Yay. All right. And group 7.
Right, that's me. Thanks, Sadie. All right, and group 7, thank you. I wrote down just as I went along taking notes, some summary sentences of each section to help me. So I'm going to share that. But I love that group 7 had representation from multiple counties and counties with a very similar experience to the disaster scenario as part of this exercise. So talking a lot from real life things that have happened. For the first objective, I had said our group was good at having relationships in place, at least between two, right? Whether that's emergency management, city emergency management to county, CIL to consumer, but not necessarily for the whole, right? Of the whole circle of everyone here. And I love that our group was willing in real time to make connections. So there was a help connecting Center for Independent Living more with emergency management. And for that first one, I think this has been stated, but we know facility evacuation needs more, but that gap is there with individual evacuation needs, and community doesn't know how to prepare. We talked through that. I was also really impressed that they then talked a lot about individual planning, like we've said, very good at that as we are, but then that information sharing could be strengthened a few days before the event. I think that's been mentioned and given as a concrete suggestion of how do we have Center for Independent Living, while they're welcome to be on those briefing calls, I think that's a lot to ask. So could emergency management have a better strategy of sharing key points so that they can then educate their consumers on what they're hearing about what may be coming soon in the next day or two? And then finally, I really loved that this group talked a lot about people-centered preparedness. So it kind of fits with the alert fatigue. So they talked specific examples of people are involved in exercises, or Boulder said they send a text and then it's pack your car and how long did it take you? Or Douglas was using certain transportation that's local that isn't always pulled to the emergency. So now they're like, how can we use that? Since they're not being utilized. And then there was an app, I know John shared a Be Ready app to really help people create a plan and really walk them along and handhold. So had some good examples to get people past the emergency denial. And I like how someone had said they really need to internalize it. Like, our community needs to feel, okay, this could happen, and now I am empowered to take some steps. So that's kind of the leaving question. And I also, the final thing was really love that they were willing to discuss hard things. So how do we even think long term, like how do people, when they are able to, I know it's not always possible, but choose a safer place to live or understand where they live and more long term as they age. And then also they talked about hard messaging. So like, here's the ideal way to evacuate. And then here's ways you may just have to, and in the end, be safe and get out any way you can. So talked through some of those really specific things that they've seen. Thanks.
This is Sadie. Thank you. Yay. I really appreciate us coming together to do this feedback this way. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open up some rooms. There's going to be 2 of you going into each room. And for 1 minute, one of you will speak up on what you plan to do next. And then the next minute, the other one will speak up on what you plan to do next from this. And so I have these rooms already assigned. You're only going to be in there 2 minutes. All right, ready? And it's going to kick you in there right away. All right, so please discuss what you plan to do next. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back. I know that was too fast, and we understand that. Those were called a buzz group. Those are able to help you come together, mind dump a little bit, because we all didn't get enough time in here to be able to speak up, or maybe in some of those rooms. So it's called a buzz group, and it helps us just stay connected and be able to keep absorbing what we're doing and moving forward. All right, with that, we are now in our closing remarks. So I'm going to actually, Kurt, do you want to go first? Do you want to go last? And I'll go after you or before you.
I'll go last.
All righty. I just want to thank you all for putting skin in the game. I always think, we all see what's happening, and a lot of times we're able to identify the problems. When we come together, we're able to identify solutions. And so being able to take this time to come to these tabletop exercises, to be part of the planning meeting, to be part of the what do we do next meetings, and then also you all taking these back to do something about it is going to be very important. I know most of you may know me, and those of you who do not, I always use my my life quote. And I share that with you as a call to action. And my life quote is to not know and do nothing about it is forgivable. We just don't know what we don't know. To know and do something about it is admirable because you're doing something about what you're learning about and you're force multiplying it out there. But to know and do nothing about it is unforgivable. We're all a bunch of good people doing good things. Let's go out and do something about it. Just again, thank you for your time. Thank you for your grace. I do expect you all to go back and do next steps and complete module 3 and 4. And will you please report back to us the measure of impact of that and your measure of successes by doing that. We can only keep growing as we keep putting the work into place. Any of these lessons observed, we need to put them into lessons learned. And lessons learned are only learned when we make it to a next normal. So let's do something about that.